What's going on, guys? Welcome to the David F. Haas podcast. Today we're talking about grudges and resentment. Um, Nelson Mandela said that holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and hoping that your enemy will die. There's another quote that's like holding on to anger is like holding a hot coal in your hand waiting to throw it at somebody else. So this whole idea around anger and resentment and how it affects us, I think, is like what we want to get into today. Um, and so hopefully what we can come from this podcast is about recognizing why you're still holding on to resentment towards others and how you can break free from that so that you can stop holding that hot coal or stop drinking that poison. The biggest issue we have around, I think, grudges and resentment is they're fueled by anger, or they're at the level of consciousness of anger. We're mad at the person for wronging us in some way, shape, or form. And the reason that we have trouble letting this go is because there's just so much fuel in anger, right? Like the angry people of the world are the ones that get shit done, right? Because they're the ones out there protesting and banging on doors and these types of things, because they become so angry that it fuels them into action. So that energy that is behind anger is kind of like intoxicating. And so this is the first, I guess, lesson, which is with respect to holding on to a grudge or resentment. Excuse me, would be what is the payoff? What is it you're getting out of holding on to this grudge or this resentment? And when you can identify what it is that you're getting from holding on to this, then it begins to kind of lose its power. So let me give you an example. So, let's say you loan somebody $1,000 and that person just doesn't pay you back for a long time, and because of that you begin to hold a grudge against them. And now every time you see them, it's awkward, and before you know it, you're just not even talking anymore. You're just completely avoiding the person. So the recognition of the payoff of the anger and resentment that you're holding on to them is that you feel superior to them in some way because you have loaned them money and they haven't paid you back. You did a good thing and they've done a bad thing. You push them down with your judgment upon them, which lifts you up, makes you superior, and that superiority is kind of intoxicating in some ways, and it makes you feel good. But the reality of the situation is you loan that person money out of the goodness of your heart because they were struggling. And if you make one little recontextualization and just change that loan to a gift, and you forgive them for not paying you back, right? Just act forgiving. So how do you begin to act forgiving? You just you call them up and be like, hey, we haven't talked in a while, let's get together. And then when you come into the situation with the dropping of the judgment and the resentment, and you've changed this whole thing from holding this grudge to this is now a gift that you're holding on to them. You've dropped the payoff that you were getting of superiority to them. Now the relationship returns to normal, and then a few weeks later they'll message you and say, hey, you know what, I completely forgot that I owed you that $1,000, and they write you a check, send you an e-transfer in today's world. So this is the power that comes from letting go, right? And so the big thing that we need to understand when it comes to these grudges that we're holding on to, and I married into an Italian family, and the Italians are like the ultimate grudge holders. They'll take a grudge to their grave. Sometimes the grudge may even send them to their grave. And it's all around this idea of forgiveness, which is crazy because a lot of Italians are very religious, and they go to church and they attend these services, and they forget like one of the primary things that Jesus taught us was forgiveness, right? So I mean, Jesus came to the world to take away the sins of the world, which is essentially to recognize that you will be forgiven by God. But the thing is about that is that you have already been forgiven. So these resentments that we hold on to, they're cultural as well, right? So it could be in the field. If you're in an Italian, I don't know what other cultures hold grudges, but if you're an Italian culture, a lot of European cultures are like holding on to grudges. So this is maybe something that you need to transcend from the family field as well. So when you recognize that, you take a little bit of power back. So I see like everything is about awareness. As we bring awareness to these things, we see them in a different light and we begin to recontextualize them. Once you're aware that your family holds grudges, then you can start recognizing when you're holding grudges, right? And then you're like, this is a family field thing. And then you drop a little bit of it there. So the next thing to recognize is that any grudge that we're holding on to is usually a reflection of what it is that we are still holding on to within ourselves. So if somebody wronged you, like this is the big thing, that somebody else wronged you, ultimately, whatever it was that they did to you is a reflection of what you are still holding on to. Okay? So this would be better explained with an example, but one's not coming to mind for me right in this moment. Okay, here we go. So I remember when I was young, I had a girlfriend that cheated on me with a friend of mine, actually, which was really devastating at the time. And so I was so angry both at the betrayal from her and from him. And, I held on to that grudge for probably like 10 years until I finally was able to let go of it. And so then I had to look within myself and be like, well, why did that trigger me so much? Or what is it about this situation that triggered me so much? One was the recognition of the betrayal that I've caused others in my life, right? So we attract what it is that we hold in mind. So if we believe that we're not a good person because we are betraying others, then we're probably going to attract betrayal into our own lives. So there's an element of taking full responsibility. So I recognize that my betrayal of others ended up attracting people that would betray me into my life. Okay. The second thing was, the reason that it created such a grudge that I would hold on to for 10 years is because in that moment, both of them essentially pushed the button to me, I'm not good enough. Right. And this is a belief system for me that was created at like a really young age. And so when you're holding on to the belief that you're not good enough, and then that button gets pushed by, in this case, a betrayal, but it could get pushed for any number of reasons, in any situation. So the belief that I'm not good enough had to be transcended in order for me to drop that grudge. Right. And recognizing that belief was created at a young age. A lot of it was created in like school and, not being a great student and these types of things. So the belief of I'm not good enough was installed at a really young age. And then when this incident happens, it triggers that, which triggers this, like, I'm not letting go of this. So then once I recognize that, they just pushed the button, I'm not good enough, I go back, I do the work, I let go of the feeling of not being good enough, which is something I'm actually still working on. But the great thing about letting go is that it doesn't have to all happen, right? I let go of my desire for money. It went from like a 10 to a 1. It's still in me though, but it's so subtle. And because of the fact that it was once at a 10 and is now at a 1, my life has dramatically improved, right? So you don't have to completely let something go in order to experience, a dramatic improvement. So once I recognize that, one, what I was judging and holding a grudge for against this person, I was also doing to other people. Okay. So then I have empathy for where they're at, because I recognize that they are human beings and they're just doing the best that they knew how to do. And I was also doing the exact same thing. So this funny scenario was that I had cheated on her. And when I came home, I was on vacation, she cheated on me. I broke up with her, and then she was the wrong person, but I had done the same thing, which is funny, that I was like, but she was the enemy. She was evil in the eyes of, everyone that I talked to, but I was doing the exact same thing. Right. So the fact that, so this is like a really practical example, but sometimes it's not so obvious, right? Sometimes it's like, you didn't immediately do something wrong. You may have done something similar in your past, and because of the guilt that you're holding on to, you then begin to hold a grudge towards this person in order to not deal with your own guilt, right? So I guess the takeaway here is recognizing what it is within you, right? The world is just a reflection of what it is you're still holding on to, and if you can begin to see that, then every trigger becomes an opportunity for growth, right? So in your greatest moments of suffering comes your greatest moments of growth. So this person that has wronged you and you have been holding a grudge onto for years, if you just recognize that this may be in this grudge, there may be the greatest gift for you if you can begin to get past the anger and look at the root cause of why they hurt you so badly, right? And then heal from that hurt. Without them doing that wrong to you, you may have never have taken the opportunity to look within and heal from something that you've been holding on to forever, which would ultimately leave you vulnerable to more attack, because until you heal from that hurt, you're always going to be vulnerable to experiencing it over and over again, right? So now looking at this wrong that has been done to you as a gift, and say thank you to the universe, to the person, and learn to explore what's really going on below the surface. So that actually brings up another point, that you have to get through the anger first, right? So the anger is a protection that you have created, right? The anger is your defense mechanism. Oh, you triggered the shame inside of me. I'm not going to let you see that shame, so I'm going to belittle you. I'm going to block you. I'm going to cut you out of my life, all because you kind of like lifted the covers on the shame that I've been hiding from for my entire life, right? So now once you recognize, okay, I recognize that I have to let this anger go. So you drop the anger, and there's a saying that underneath all mad is sad. So now you drop the anger and you say, okay, well, what's underneath this anger? Oh shit. The button they really pushed was the feeling of being less than when I got rejected by this girl or this boy when I was in high school, So everything is connected and everything is happening in perfect synchronicity. So when you learn to take the blinders off, and this podcast, it may be that moment for you, to take an inventory of who is it that you're still holding resentment to. I remember I used to have like a hit list of all the people I was gonna like fuck over once I made it, but I dropped all that now. And, now that I potentially could have the ability to try and fuck somebody over with, finances and stuff, I've let it all go. Right. This is coming from experience. So the second thing is that, or the third, I don't know what point I'm on, but the third thing is that forgiveness is a verb, meaning you can fake it till you make it. So if you're holding on to a grudge with someone, just start acting forgiving towards them, right? Even though it might hurt you in the beginning, and there might be a ton of resistance, but just keep acting forgiving. So what does that look like? Well, if they come to a family function and they're there and you hate them, just act like you've already forgiven them. So what does that look like? Hey, how you doing? Mary, great to see you again. Hope everything's going well. And while it may be fake, the more you stay in the field of forgiveness, the more you become forgiving. So I think these are the steps essentially. One is you got to get through the anger. That's number one. Two is recognizing that you're probably doing this in your own life at some way, or you have done it. Whatever it is that they have done to you, you have done to other people. And when you can see that, you begin to have empathy for them, because you recognize that we're all just doing our best. The third is you have to uncover what's underneath this anger, right? What button did they push? And I love this analogy that, when someone pushes your button, right, the first question we want to be asking is, what button did they just push, right? And if we can start doing that, we get beyond the anger right away, right? We recognize that we want to respond with anger, but we recognize that anger is just a defense, right? So if we can notice that right from the moment, oh shit, I'm triggered right here. Why am I so triggered, right? You immediately begin doing the analysis to get beyond the anger, right? And then once you realize what that trigger is connected to, then you begin to do the inner work. And then guess what? No one can wrong you anymore, because you have been able to become free of all of the buttons. All the buttons that were once in you are all now disconnected, right? So someone can say, you're a piece of shit. And if you believe you're a piece of shit, that's going to trigger you. But if you believe you're not a piece of shit, then you're going to be like, yeah, I understand that that's your opinion, but I'm sorry that my actions have man, you made you feel this way. and they're immediately forgiven for their outburst towards you because you don't believe that. So if someone says, this is one that I had, when I was running a bunch of ads for an event I was running, some guy was saying, this guy's a piece of shit, he doesn't know anything. And immediately I went to anger. Like, I was like literally at the point where I was going to call this guy out and be like, hey, listen, if you really want to like deal with this, why don't we meet up in this parking lot? That's the point I had gone to. Like, I was going to go and beat this guy senseless, right? And then I recognized that anger, right? So anger is a great trigger to pick up on because it's so easily recognizable, right? Like, anger is like you're driving your car, you're squeezing your steering wheel. And I was doing it the other day. I lost my sailboat race, and I was so frustrated. I punched my steering wheel, and I'm like, why am I so triggered by this, right? And so anger is a great indicator. It's like a warning light in your car that's going off, right? And so once you recognize, oh, I'm in anger, why? Why did I get triggered, right? So with respect to this guy that was posting on my social media, it was that he was pushing the button of self-doubt, right? So especially during this was in the beginning of like my coaching, right? Where I was still like uneasy. I was constantly questioning myself, like, can I really help people? Like, are people really going to get something from this event? Is this good value? Am I trying to get all of these things? And so then he pushed that button. Like, it was like pinpoint accurate, right? So my defense to not feel that vulnerability, to not feel the shame, to not feel the self-doubt was to respond with anger. But luckily I caught myself and didn't respond, and just said, hey, my response to him was this: hey, I remember when I was just like you, when a single Facebook post could send me into a fit of rage, right? And so it was immediately let go of because I recognized where he was, because I was able to recognize what was in him was once in me, right? Or could even still be in me. That anger that he's feeling towards me, I was just responding right back to him. So if you want to break free from grudges, it's never about what's going on out there. It's never about what he or she has done to you. It's about how it made you feel. Now, I know what people are going to say. Well, you can't just let people walk all over you and blah, 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 and this and that. And yeah, 100%. Of course not. You can forgive someone and still not have them in your life. But people really get stuck on this one, because I hear people say, I forgive them, but I'm just not going to talk to them anymore. Well, it's not real true forgiveness, right? I always kind of I love the lion analogy. It's like, you can have acceptance for a lion as he attacks a zebra and eats a zebra. And I can just look at that lion and say, yeah, the lion's just doing what he is. I don't like it, but the lion's just being a lion, right? But if that lion attacks me, I'm not just going to sit there and lay down and be like, the lion's just doing what he's doing. I'm of course going to fight back, right? So we can have forgiveness for other people, but the people that have wronged us or have betrayed us, we just want to put up boundaries. So, for example, I forgive my ex-girlfriend of 20 years ago that cheated on me, but I'm not going to date her again, right? So, because you want to have these boundaries. And maybe if I was single, maybe I would date her again at this point, because I recognize that, she was just doing the same things I was doing back in the day. So this is the process. This is how we let go of this. And when you really start to break free from this, you get to this place where you become unfuckwithable, meaning there's nothing that is going to happen out there that is going to affect you, right? And if it does, I look at all triggers as gifts, even though in the moment I'm like, it's hard to see the gift, Last week, I was out at the park and I had been working really hard because we had this big event that I had oversold, and I was working hard to get these domes up, and then finally on Saturday I got everything done, and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to take Saturday off. I'm going to clean my garage. So I got all my garage, everything pulled out of my garage, and my business partner calls me at noon and says, the cleaner's not here. All right. So I had to drive all the way out to the park and put all the shit back in my garage. And the whole entire time I was just in this rage, just rage driving out to the park. And I recognized right away that I was in rage, right? I was in a state of anger. But I chose actively to remain there just because it was kind of somewhat entertaining. And then it wasn't until that I left the park and drove back home, and I recognized, okay, I got to sit with this anger, right? And then when I recognized it was really an anger at myself, right? It was anger at myself for not having my scheduling worked out, running around, keeping my head down, just trying to get things done and never really looking up and taking that step back. So it was everything that I was holding on to about myself. It was not about blaming the cleaner or my business partner or anybody else. It was all about me, right? So it's always about what's going on in here. And the sooner that we begin to realize that, the sooner we start to become free. And we talk about freedom, and it's becoming more and more of a topic of conversation these days as our freedoms, begin to get taken away. But all freedom comes from within. And Viktor Frankl wrote about this in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. He was in like Nazi concentration camps, and he was still able to find meaning in his life, even though he was, in the worst situations ever. So it's like freedom doesn't come from being able to fly on a plane, right? Freedom comes from within. And until we learn how to let go of everything that that we're holding on to, we will never become truly free. We'll be prisoners, and we'll be our own prisoners in our own bodies, in our own minds, in our own soul as well. So the mind is a reflection of what is being held in consciousness. So if you're in the state of anger, you're going to continuously attract situations where you are angry. The angry person always finds something to be angry about. So when you can recognize that anger is that warning light, you can then begin to take that look within. And then once you look within, the next question is, well, what do you do if you've uncovered that it's shame, right? That you're avoiding, or self-doubt, or whatever. Well, the next thing is that you need to lean into those feelings and begin to feel them. You need to share them in proper settings with a coach or with a therapist, in spiritual groups, in like things like my Letting Go school, where we're sharing these things that we have experienced throughout our lives. And as we begin to share, allow ourselves to connect more and more to the emotion, we start to become free of it. It's like, in order to heal, you need to feel. So that is essentially the letting go process. The great news is, though, is that just awareness alone is enough to start bringing you out of it. So like, Buddha said that rare is it to hear of enlightenment. Even more rare is it to pursue enlightenment as a worldly goal or a life goal. But the thing is that once you even hear of enlightenment, you're already being drawn towards becoming more enlightened, right? So all you have to do is bring awareness to the fact that, becoming free of these things is possible. All you need to do is bring awareness to the fact that grudges are just a reflection of what you're holding on to. And now that you have that awareness by listening to this podcast, things begin to change. And while you may not solve your grudge, later on today, you have now unlocked that potential in the quantum field, and you are being drawn towards a solution. And that's the beauty of awareness. That's the beauty of personal spiritual development, is that you can, with awareness alone, you can begin to change, and there's nothing you need to do. You just allow it to happen and unfold. So I'll leave it at that. Hope that answers some questions. Thanks again for joining me. Don't forget, if you haven't already, just click that subscribe button. Every single Wednesday, we are, diving deep into how to become free, let go, and move up the scale of consciousness.